My dear friends, in the Jubilee year of the millennium, 2000, the whole community went to Rome, and a lot of it was on foot. And we would sing the office of the time of day in Latin in whatever church we found at that time. One of the places we went to was the place linked with the readings of this day, Septuagint, or rather Sexagesima, 60 days before Easter, for it is the day in which, for historic reasons, St. Paul is recalled. The readings are all linked with him and the Word, and so are the prayers. This traditionally would be the Statio in St. Paul outside the walls, going back to ancient times. Well, there we were in Tre Fontane. It just happens that sometime earlier, the abbot, Don Jacques, a Frenchman, had been with us, and he had just had the shock, because he was only a brother, he wasn't ordained, he was just a Trappist. He had been asked to be abbot of that community. So with dispensation from the Holy See, he was made everything in a few hours. Deacon, priest, and abbot. And he told us about the place which he had under his care. Tre Fontane, 3 fountains, and we honoured the 3 fountains, where the head of the apostle, after being chopped off by the sword, bounced 3 times. Now, I'll come back to that in a second. He went on to explain to us that indeed it would make sense that this is where it happened. Why? Il disait, un lieu de violence. It was a place of violence. It was a gladiatorial school. That means they had to know how to aim when executing. And it was in the interests of the poor victim that he put out his neck so there'd be only one shot. It shortened the process. Hence the pain of some of the early female martyrs, the children who were martyred very early on, only a short neck. However, he went on to explain how, if you carry on walking, you will find that it's not that far away to St. Paul outside the walls, where the head is supposed to have landed and rested, and buried in honour and honoured to this day. And by the way, it was so. Do you remember that they opened it up in the year of St. Paul, and it was down there. So he explained, therefore it would make sense that it was honoured there, it's within walking distance. We carried on and we visited that. Now I jump back to Tre Fontane, the Word. Do you know, in fairly recent times, something happened there, concerning precisely the book, the revelation, the Word. There was an extreme Protestant, he was an Adventist of some kind, Latin Catholic obviously, who was about to deliver an anti-Catholic sermon attacking Our Lady. He was there precisely waiting for the shop of the Trappists to open to buy some chocolate for his 3 children. It was in the siesta, so he was swatting up his notes for this anti-Catholic conference, and his children disappeared. Oh, where did they get to? He went looking for them. They were looking in one direction and crying out, Belladonna! Belladonna! Beautiful lady, beautiful lady. He tried to shift and move them, but they were as heavy as lead and couldn't be shifted. And suddenly he fell into a trance and was confronted by the beautiful lady himself. And she talked to him for quite some time. And you know that until he died, he had a supernatural gift of remembering every single word in this conference that she gave him on the one true church that he was keen on demolishing. And one thing amongst many that she told him was that the dogma of the Assumption was true. This was before it was defined. We're going to 1947 at this point. And she told him that she had to find, or he had to find his way to the Holy Father himself. And you know that he had on him this dagger, written on it, Morte al Papa, death to the Pope. He meant business. He was going to assassinate Pius XII. It happened through a contact. He was able to get to a private audience with Pope Pius XII. Only a few present, but at the end of it, the ceremoniarios said, "Is there anyone here who would like to address a word to the Holy Father before we disappear?" Sacri Parade. He went up to him and presented him with this dagger with Morte al Papa written on it, inscribed. This was meant for you. But the Blessed Virgin intervened. Do you know that he was not surprised? He knew that there was going to be an attempt on him, but that she would intervene. Rather like what happened to his successor on the 13th of May, 1981. Now, one of the things that he told Pius XII was her insistence on the Assumption. 3 years later, he defied it. But there's one thing I'd like to remember about this series of visions, which was recognized immediately by the Vatican. It's now a little sanctuary opposite the monastery. She did tell him, and it's rare, she did tell him clearly, the Catholic Church is the one true church. And the Pope was the vicar of her soul. Remember that before demolishing anyone who is Pope. I want to make a jump. St. Paul gave us about half the New Testament, the Word. I want to dwell for a second on this question of the Word. Words are like leaves, and where they most abound, must depth of sense beneath is seldom to be found. I picked up this from the Purgatory manuscript because it's a hint with regard to the way that we converse. Remember, the more we talk, the less we're heard. We become heavyweights. And it's very sad that very few people can hear their own weight and pain. People who talk and talk and talk don't hear themselves. And those also who talk and talk and talk know a lot, do they not? But they stay with the volume of knowledge that they have. Why? It's all output. It's rather like a geyser that can't stop spurting itself out. The interior is outside. Now listen to this. It's a constant in the life of the mystics. The Lord doesn't like talkativeness. Love everyone, but don't have utter confidence in anyone. In anyone, I say, because Jesus alone wants to be your true confidant. Everything for him and for him alone. Do you see the difference? That energy now spared goes inward, and he becomes the one that we address. Carry out all your actions beneath God's regard. I've already told you, consult him before everything you have to do and say, oh, what graces will then flow over you? Let your life be a life of faith and of love. And if you act in this manner, you know what I said to you on the matter. Don't do anything to make yourself noticed exteriorly. That is part of the same problem. When we talk, we are saying, I am. I must be noticed. I reign over you and all present. Avoid the company. Now this comes out in the diary of St. Faustina as well. Avoid the company, without offending charity, of those sisters who are too extrovert. Now, there's a reason for that. When we are with people who are talking a lot all the time, we can't go inward ourselves, and we tend to engage with them. Who lack charity, You, for your part, just be occupied with your own business. Now that's something you can take away with you. Spiritually, mind your own business. The Lord did not ask you to do everything on earth. Efface yourself. Do you know, Padre Pio and Cure Vaz did not want to appear on photos. Eventually, Padre Pio was obliged to out of obedience, and the Cure Vaz was never caught until he was on his deathbed, dead already. You, for your part, just be occupied with your own business, efface yourself, never express your feeling unless you're forced to. Now that's interesting. People have an opinion about everything. Of course, that opinion is ex cathedra and is the last word on the discourse. Opinion. It's linked with opinor in Latin, I think. Well, I can have a think of my own, but it's not the only think in the world. Concentrate your attention on the one sole object which should be the motive force of your whole life, Jesus. Jesus from morning to evening and from evening to morning. And so I would leave you a little hint, my friends. It's this. Observe. Look at the various points of contact with the outside world that were given to Adam. You have here the olfactive sense, the sense of smell. He has a very long nose. And the spiritual man also has a very long spiritual nose, because he kind of picks things up. Even dogs pick things up. Do you know that a dog can sense the real presence? It has been proved. The way that we pick things up implies that we are fully receptive. We have our spiritual antennae fully operative, and we suss out the person before us without saying anything. We just have a good notion what is going on inside that person. And there are a few tricks that make it happen more easily. Observe. The size of Adam's ears, they're enormous. They are well tuned. 2 ears and 1 mouth. The hint being there, a proportion of 2 to 1 with regard to emission of words. But there is more. Observe that the mouth is currently sealed. It does, however, have a twinkle of a smile, which is nice, because we can speak with a smile, which an animal can't do. He always has the same look, more or less, on his mouth. But this one here is interesting, because when the mouth is fully sealed, it is safe. It can't do any harm. The ears are functioning, so there's input. There's no output, and he's playing a trick. Did you ever hear of the 5 Cambridge graduates who went to work for Russia as spies and got involved with the workings of the British intelligentsia as though they were part of it, but filtering information to the wrong side? The most famous was Tim Philby. He was working actually in Bletchley Park, which was the state house where the codes of the Nazis and Russians were being cracked. But he was feeding information all the time to the wrong side. But he had a trick. You know what it was? He knew where the key people were going to be loose of tongue when they were off guard. In vino veritas, in wine the truth is. So a little bit of alcohol does make the tongue wag freely. And he would know where they would be discreetly amongst themselves, a posh tavern. And he would actually discreetly be there before they got there. But he would be in a little alcove, hidden by a newspaper, with a tiny bit of alcohol before him, and he would do what? Within earshot, he would pick up the conversation as the evening went on, taking mental notes, but saying nothing. It works. If you want to learn, keep it sealed and open these portals. You learn far more at the end than by talking and talking and talking. But there is more. Adam, there, I would say, is slightly British because of the smile. Each culture is different. Do we have to always be in maximal mode? When we talk ponderately, we emit less wasted energy. If you put an Englishman, a Frenchman, an Italian before the same problem and surprise, you'll have something like this. The Englishman, oh, I say. The Frenchman, oh la 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 la. The Italian, oh mamma mia. The same surprise, but a lot of emission of energy in vain. I remember when in France, my next door neighbour, the novice, had his school books still with him, and some of them were the English books that they were learning English from in France, taking the mickey out of us. And one of them was this, the picture of this very English-looking gentleman in his office with a handlebar moustache. And in comes this gigantic boa constrictor. Ends up around his neck, thoroughly menacing his future, with his tongue out and ready to kill. And the gentleman with the handlebar moustache picks up the phone and says, "Miss Winterton, would you put me through to the zoo?" Didn't waste any energy. How much do we?